All right, thank you, and thank you all for being here. The report that we're releasing today presents a variety of statistics and metrics that measure and also illustrate the real state of immigration enforcement today. Unlike what is typically available, for example, on the ICE or DHS website, these are fairly raw statistics and data runs, and they are what the agency managers see in order to evaluate their performance and to know what is happening within the agency. But it's not usually what the public is able to see, and definitely not the kind of material that has been made available to the public in recent years. And the most important thing that was revealed in this collection of reports that I was able to obtain, and what's contrary to what is frequently repeated, what you hear at the vigils and protests and chants of stop the deportations, no more deportations, and what the amnesty proponents say about record deportations. In fact, ICE enforcement activity has been in decline since 2010. For the last 3 years now, ICE enforcement activity has declined by 40%. And what I'm referring to when I say ICE enforcement activity is primarily interior enforcement as measured by ICE arrests and ICE removals in the interior as opposed to at the border. And this is the activity of the two main component agencies of ICE, one of which is known as Enforcement and Removal Operations, which is ERO, and also Homeland Security Investigations, otherwise known as HSI. Some of the reports that I was able to obtain showed that what ICE calls now departures, or what most people call deportations, were going to be 10% less in 2013 than 2012. And then just yesterday, I was able to obtain what I was told was the actual total of deportations for 2013. What I produced in the report are projections based on the metrics that I was able to obtain from ICE reports internally. And they were not for the complete year of 2013, so I projected what those were likely to be. But yesterday I was able to obtain what is apparently the real final numbers for 2013 that were finalized a couple of weeks ago and have been withheld by ICE. The total number of deportations that will be reported by ICE in 2013 is 364,700. That is about 40% fewer removals this year than last year, and is in fact the lowest level since at least 2008. This decline has to be of great concern to policymakers and especially to the public. It's not as if there is a shortage of illegal aliens living in our country, that there's no one for them to arrest anymore. In fact, we know from other studies that have been done that it looks like illegal entries and the illegal population is increasing. And there's especially no shortage of criminal aliens in the country. So it's important to remember that this decline in removals and in ICE enforcement activity is occurring at a time when ICE has better tools and more resources and more personnel than ever before. So the number of removals really should be rising, but instead it's falling. And when you drill down a little bit farther in the report and look at some of the more detailed metrics on ICE, for example, it's Table 4 in the report, which, by the way, if people have not picked up copies, there are some on the table outside, and it will be on our website. You can see the most important metrics for ICE interior enforcement activity: detainers, arrests, and the charging documents that agents issue when they're going to put someone on the path to removal. Those have dropped 20 to 25%. In the last year alone. These declines occurred in every single ICE field office around the country. Some of these individual field offices had declines of 40% or more, and one even had about 60%, 62% to be exact, and that was the Atlanta field office. And it's really hard to imagine how you could explain a 60% decline in enforcement activity in one particular field office. The biggest declines were Atlanta, Salt Lake City, Chicago, Houston, San Diego, and also in this area, the Washington, D.C. field office, which covers the District of Columbia and Virginia. They all showed declines in the number of illegal aliens who were charged and the number of criminal aliens who were charged. and removed. Now, Dan Cadman, who's also on the panel, is going to talk a little bit more about the policies that led to that prosecutorial discretion, which has been mentioned by Mr. Barletta. The administration has maintained that these policies of prosecutorial discretion and some others were necessary to keep ICE focused on the mission of removing the highest priority, which is criminal aliens, non-citizens living here who have committed other crimes, local crimes, whether it's murder, rape, larceny, what have you, something in addition to their immigration offense. But as it turns out, the number of criminal aliens that ICE has removed in the last year has also declined. The 2013 number that ICE is going to report is 216,800, which is a 4% decline from last year, 2012. Now, what you will hear from ICE is that's the highest percentage of criminal aliens to total removals in 1 year, 59%. I'm sure that's what they're going to say. We've removed the highest proportion of criminal aliens ever in history. But it's actually fewer criminal alien removals than before. It's about 8,000 fewer removals. And again, this decline in criminal deportations is true of nearly every ICE field office around the country. In the Washington, D.C., Virginia field office, the decline was 25%. That's 1,000 fewer criminal aliens who were removed this year over last year. In a district, in a field office the size of the state of Virginia and the District of Columbia, 1,000 more criminal aliens living here than should be, that makes a big difference for public safety. And again, it is not because ICE is lacking information on who these people are and what crimes they have committed. They have that information now as a result of the Secure Communities program and other programs that they've gotten up and running over the last few years. ICE is choosing not to use its authority, and agency leadership is telling agents not to enforce the law. So it's reasonable to ask, how is it possible that ICE has been able to claim record-breaking numbers of deportations when in fact they have been in decline? That is not as easy to explain as a line going downhill. They've been able to do it essentially through smoke and mirrors of reporting types of cases. There was a program launched in the southwest border sectors in November of 2010, whereby large numbers of illegal border crossers who were apprehended by the Border Patrol, and instead of the Border Patrol handling them, as would have been in the case years ago, these individuals were instead bused to ICE detention facilities in Arizona, California, and Texas, booked in, held for about 12 hours, and then bused to a different Border Patrol sector than the one in which they were apprehended, and returned at that point. Voila, you have not only a border apprehension to count, but you also have an ICE removal to count. And the president himself has confirmed that that is what's going on, that's what's behind the record deportations. He told a group of journalists almost a year ago that the record-breaking removal numbers were actually a little bit deceptive because they included a large number of Border Patrol cases that were being processed by ICE. So we blew up a couple of the tables from the report for you to see how exactly this plays into the statistics that have been reported. And the first table shows the exact numbers of removals that resulted from arrests that were made by all the different component agencies of DHS who make apprehensions of illegal aliens. And again, this is from internal ICE statistics that have not been made, are typically not made public. But you can see that, and it's illustrated more simply by the chart below, where you see over the years the blue line of representing Border Patrol apprehensions that resulted in removals going way up over time, and the red line of regular ICE interior cases going down. and in about 2012 they cross. The percentage of ICE deportations that they are claiming is about is now, both in 2012 and 2013, about half of the total deportations that they are claiming as record numbers. In the last year of the Bush administration, 2008, Border Patrol cases represented only 1/3 of total deportation. So this represents a real shift in focus for ICE. They're basically spending at least half of their productivity processing Border Patrol cases instead of working cases in the interior. And so that's essentially the story of the smoke and mirrors that they have allowed to, or sought to define their record of what they call smarter, more effective Border Patrol, or excuse me, smarter, more effective immigration enforcement. And if I have time, there's one last statistic from the report that I'd like to point out to you, which is in the report in both Table 4 and Table 8. The metrics that I was able to obtain from ICE show that right now ICE is carrying a caseload of a total of 1.8 million cases on its docket. And that's broken down into people who are pending a final decision and people who have already received a final decision that they were ordered removed. And these are called the post-final order docket. That includes people who have been processed, been to court, told their story, and been ordered removed, but who are still living here in the country. If there is one single statistic that I think illustrates the utter dysfunction of our immigration system, it's that number. 872,000 cases on ICE's docket who are what they call post-final order, which means they have been ordered removed and are still living here. Some of them are in detention, a very small number, but there are 860,000 of them who are not in detention and who likely will not be removed. Some didn't show up for hearings, others didn't show up for their removal. But there is no other court system in our nation that would tolerate such contempt of decisions made in the system. And we shouldn't either. So the first order of business as Congress contemplates immigration reform ought to be, as Mr. Barletta said, to enforce the laws we have and restore some credibility to the immigration enforcement system that we have.